The most alarming feature of contemporary American politics is not merely polarization, but the steady normalization of white nationalist ideas at the highest levels of leadership. Nowhere is this clearer than in the emerging post-Trump Republican Party, where Vice President JD Vance has positioned himself both as heir to Donald Trump's coalition and as a bridge between mainstream conservatism and openly extremist factions. While Vance presents his approach as inclusive and pragmatic, his rhetoric and alliances reveal a strategy that tolerates and increasingly legitimizes white supremacist ideology under the guise of America First politics.
In the United States of America, you don't have to apologize for being white anymore.
At Turning Point USA's America Fest, Vance refused to condemn anti-Semitism or explicitly distance the conservative movement from figures who openly embrace white nationalist beliefs. Instead, he framed calls for accountability as purity tests, arguing that the movement should welcome anyone who loves America. On its face, this language sounds unifying, but in practice, it functions as an abdication of moral boundaries. White nationalism is not a disagreement over tax rates or foreign policy. It is an ideology built on exclusion. Refusing to reject it is not neutrality, it is permission. Vance's insistence that the movement should avoid cancelling each other collapses a fundamental distinction between disagreement and harm. When neo-Nazis, anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists, and advocates of a racially defined nation are welcomed into a political coalition, the cost is borne by those they target. History offers no example in which extremists can be accommodated without marginalizing everyone else. As Trump learned after describing white supremacist marchers as very fine people, there is no way to stand with racists without standing against the people they hate.
Donald Trump and I have a list of better judges and prosecutors to enact swifter justice. So join us in the fight against the stupid Senate rules to stand in their way.
Unlike Trump, who often relied on ambiguity and plausible deniability, Vance's ideological commitments appear more deliberate. Over the past several years, he has increasingly adopted the language and assumptions of the far right, repackaging them in polished pseudo-intellectual terms. His praise for restrictive immigration laws from the 1920s, his arguments that Americans with deep ancestral roots have a stronger claim to the country, and his flirtation with the idea of heritage Americans all mirror long-standing white nationalist talking points. These arguments may avoid overt racial slurs, but their logic is unmistakable. Real Americans are white Americans. This framing collapses under even minimal scrutiny. The United States has never been a nation defined by a single ethnicity, and the Constitution's post-Civil War amendments explicitly rejected that notion, yet there is a growing movement on the right to undermine those amendments by questioning birthright citizenship and the legitimacy of multiracial democracy itself. Vance's rhetoric aligns with this trend, even as he cloaks it in appeals to tradition, Christianity, and national cohesion. At America Fest, Vance declared that Americans no longer need to apologize for being white, and asserted that the United States always will be a Christian nation. Statements like these are not accidental. They signal to a base increasingly animated by grievance politics that cultural dominance is under threat, and that Vance is willing to defend it. This messaging resonates powerfully with younger conservatives, among whom open admiration for authoritarian figures and ethnic nationalism is becoming disturbingly common. The energy in these circles is real, and Vance appears to believe it represents the future of the Republican Party. That calculation explains why influential organizations like Turning Point USA have become backing him as a potential successor to Trump. With its vast grassroots network and influence among young conservatives, Turning Point offers Vance an infrastructure perfectly suited to mobilizing an intensely loyal, ideologically rigid base. But intensity is not the same as breadth. politics is ultimately about addition, not subtraction, and white nationalism is inherently subtractive. Trump's political success depended on convincing just enough voters, especially voters of color, that his most extreme rhetoric was performative or exaggerated. Vance, though, lacks that advantage. His worldview is more coherent, more explicit, and therefore harder to disavow. As the Trump movement shifts from rhetoric to policy, the voters who were willing to give it the benefit of the doubt are already drifting away. Internal fights over anti-Semitism, identity, and belonging are accelerating that collapse, not resolving it. Even within MAGA Republican spaces, resistance is emerging. Some figures have openly argued that ranking Americans by ancestry or race is fundamentally un-American. These interventions have been met with silence or hostility, underscoring how far the movement has shifted and how fragile its unity has become. Vance may claim he is building a big tent, but white nationalism cannot coexist with genuine pluralism. It is an either-or proposition. Either the Republican Party rejects racial hierarchy, or it becomes defined by it. Pretending otherwise does not create unity, it merely delays the inevitable reckoning. The real question is not whether white supremacy is returning to American leadership, it already has, but how much damage will be done before it is confronted directly and taken seriously as the Nazification of American politics. And let's just spare a thought for Vance's wife Usha, an intelligent woman of color caught in the middle of her husband's shift to the far right. Let me be clear, anyone who attacks my wife, whether their name is Jen Psaki or Nick Fuentes, can eat shit, Vance said in an interview published by the online magazine Unheard. That's my official policy as Vice President of the United States, he said. But somehow it's okay for Vance to tell Americans that they don't have to apologize for being white anymore, like they ever did, with 97% of all leadership and power in America controlled by white men. And finally, at the same event, Erica Kirk, who assumed leadership of Turning Point USA after the death of her husband, far-right activist Charlie Kirk, publicly threw her support behind Vice President JD Vance as the future presidential candidate, signaling that the powerful organization would mobilize on his behalf in 2028. Speaking at the opening of Turning Point's national conference in Phoenix, Kirk said the group was committed to helping Vance become the nation's 48th president, emphasizing her personal connection to him as a close friend of her late husband. Kirk stepped into the leadership role following her husband's assassination earlier this year. Prior to Erica Kirk's speech, Turning Point USA reported having 9,000 college chapters and 1,100 high school chapters, but apparently received 18,000 new requests to start chapters at colleges and high schools after her speech, indoctrinating young Americans to grow up with far-right Christian nationalist and racist isolationist views. The Democrats offer no adjacent ideological alternative. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5-Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.